My name is Jason Blood. I'm a member of the Knights of the Round Table. It's the 1200s and I follow a great leader known as the mighty King Arthur. He is the king of Camelot, a glorious kingdom with the strongest military in history so far. But now King Arthur and the knights have their biggest challenge yet. Camelot was taken over from the inside by Arthur's sister, Morgana. She is an evil witch that hates Arthur and stole his kingdom from him. I know one thing, I have King Arthur's back. We need to send word to our friends from the west, we need reinforcements, said Arthur. Jason stands up and says, I will be the one to travel to the west for help. Then all the men stand ready for the challenge. King Arthur stands with his noblemen and says, Good, I will send all of you. When you all get there you will meet with my father, Merlin. He will grant us what we need to defeat Morgana and take back Camelot. Then the men start cheering for the thought of regaining their kingdom. Then Jason asks, What will you do, sire? Arthur smiles and says, I'm the distraction. For y'all to make it to the west undetected I will have to distract Morgana and her army. The brave men now know their missions to take by their kingdom so they start preparing. The Knights of the Round Table head west on horseback to meet Merlin and King Arthur calls on some of his civilians to help him in this debacle. Arthur stands in front of their camp and says, People of Camelot, I am your king and I need brave men to help take back Camelot. Who's with me? An awkward silence comes about before a villager says, We are not warriors, we are mainly made of women, children, and the elderly. Where are your knights, my king? Arthur looks into the crowd and says, They are on a mission to aid us in our victory, but for them to succeed, we need to storm the front of the gates. The villager responds, We can't storm the gates, we can barely survive here. Arthur responds, If I can't get 25 of you then we will never get to return home. That witch will hunt us down and kill every last one of us and she doesn't care that y'all are women, children, and the elderly. She will come, and as your king it is best if we attack now so that we can live long enough to get the help we need to overthrow the kingdom and take back Camelot. The villagers now understand the severity of their situation, and Arthur got the men he needed to act as his Knights of the Round Table so that his sister doesn't know they are gone. He gets the villagers suited up and takes them a mile off of the gate to set up a camp. The knights make it to their friends in the east. They approach Merlin's covert and Jason tells them to wait here as he goes to speak to Merlin. Jason walks in and sees Merlin sitting there with his eyes closed and he is humming. Jason says, Merlin the wise and powerful wizard, your son King Arthur has sent us here to retrieve your help, along with this kingdom's army. Merlin stops humming and says, Jason Blood. Jason curiously asks, How do you know my name? Merlin laughs and says, You did say I was wise, but I'm the most powerful wizard ever. I know this because I have traveled all over our timeline. I've seen the very beginning of time all the way to the very end of it, so when I say you will do great things, I mean it. Jason responds, Well, thank you, sir. So does that mean you will help us? Merlin says, Yes, I have been expecting this day to come for a very long time and I have great plans for you, Jason Blood. Merlin and Jason get an army together to aid King Arthur in battle. Now all the king has to do is distract Morgana for a few hours. King Arthur and his new army marches to the front gates with their catapults. Morgana's guards rush to tell her about the army. She comes to meet with Arthur at the gate. Morgana says to Arthur, Well, hello there, brother. Do you like what I have done with the place? Arthur responds, I'm here to discuss a surrender treaty. Morgana laughs and says, I know too well, brother, you would never surrender your kingdom, nor would your puppet master Merlin, won't let you surrender. Arthur says, You underestimate what I'm willing to do for my kingdom, as long as Camelot lives, and my people are safe, and I will step down, under your command. Morgana says, I see right through your facade, brother. What are you really planning? Then King Arthur swings his sword, aiming to cut off her head, but before he can, she freezes him in a block of ice, only leaving his head uncovered. Morgana then says, You really thought you could defeat me? I have power you could only dream of. Then over the horizon, the knights and the reinforcements charge over the hilltops down onto the kingdom. Morgana says, Get Arthur inside the kingdom and get every troop ready for battle. Then her eyes glow green as she raises an undead army from underneath the ground. the army starts crawling out of the ground. Jason and the knights start attacking the undead army, but every time they knock one down, they get back up. Then lightning strikes the battleground and Merlin appears. He says, "In order for these men to serve their sire, I grant them blades of fire." Then all of the knights' swords burst into flames, and now when Jason strikes an undead warrior, they turn to ash. Morgana is pissed by this, so she whips out her book and says, "For which I cannot depend on men, I summon Hell's dragon." Then a fiery portal opens to reveal a monstrous dragon. Morgana then says, "That will keep Merlin busy." Then Merlin starts to wave his arms in a circular motion, creating strong winds to raise him into the sky, and move him towards the dragon. Once close enough to the dragon, he uses his staff to shoot blue energy bolts at the beast. The dragon roars, then sprays fire at Merlin as Merlin creates a blue energy shield, then strikes the beast with lightning. Then the dragon starts flying higher and higher. Merlin follows the beast, then the dragon sweeps underneath Merlin's feet, taking out the wind that was giving Merlin his flight. As Merlin plummets to the ground, he then teleports back to the tall end of the army. The knights have taken out the majority of the undead army and are now moving on to the gates where Morgana's living army is waiting for battle. Arthur's army starts firing the catapult onto the gates, making a path for the army to invade through. The dragon comes down on the army, breathing fire onto them. Merlin uses the gates to trap in the cage the dragon. Then Merlin yell out, "Retrieve King Arthur. I will try to hold the beast down for as long as I can." So the knights storm the castle, losing many good men. One man makes it through all the commotion into the castle. His name is Jason Blood. Jason approaches Arthur in the cube of ice and says, "My king, what should I do?" Arthur, while shivering, looks down to Jason and says, "Run." Then Morgana walks into the room and says, "Oh, what do we have here? A noble knight here to save his king and reclaim his kingdom." Jason responds, "History will not view you in a very good light after this day, Morgana." Morgana laughs and says, "History is told by the victors, and I don't see you, my brother and my father, pulling this off. You see this book in my hand? This is the Book of the Damned, a very powerful witchcraft book that I plan to use to win this battle and end this war today." Then Jason uses his flaming sword to break the ice, trapping King Arthur. Then he throws his king an axe. Morgana then says, "1 on 2, that's not very fair." Then duplicates herself into many different copies. The two knights start cutting away at the copies as they run towards them. Then Morgana flies up and throws a giant icicle at Jason, but he blocks it with his sword, but in doing so his sword goes flying off, and he falls to the ground. She starts to send another icicle, but then Arthur throws his axe, hitting her in her arm. She lets out a scream, then says, "How dare you touch me? You will definitely pay with your life." Arthur starts running and jumps for the flaming sword. Morgana start breathing blistery ice at Arthur, but he deflects it with the sword, hold the deflection for many seconds, but when she stops using her ice breath, he brings the sword back and tries to strike her through the heart, but before he can, she teleports behind him, grabs him and throws him against the wall. Then Jason sneaks up on Morgana and jumps on her back, tackling her to the ground. They struggle for a second, then using wind, she blows him off. Then he grabs the axe and starts charging at her, but at the same time, Arthur with the flaming sword is charging from the other direction. She looks both directions, then at the last second teleports away with a flaming sword to the heart. As he falls to the ground, Arthur drops down with him saying, "I'm so sorry, my friend, I didn't mean to stab you. I'm so sorry." Morgana says, "Now it's just you and me, brother." Then she uses her telekinesis power to throw Jason's body out of the castle and onto the battlefield. Merlin sees this and teleports over to Jason. Jason starts coughing up blood and Merlin says, "I believe we can win this fight today, but you're gonna have to be brave and make a sacrifice for Camelot." Jason nods his head and says, "I'm strong, do it." Merlin then closes his eyes and says, "Change, change, O form of man. Free the prince forever damned, free the might from fleshy mire. Boil the blood in the heart for fire. Gone, gone, O form of man. Rise the demon Etrigan." Fire burst out of Jason's eyes and mouth, changing him into the demon known as Etrigan. Etrigan turns to Merlin and says, "Oh brother, you have freed me, and desperate you are I can see, but am I permanently free, or am I only here to fight as you need? Merlin responds, you now experience the most freedom you've ever had. You are now bound to a human named Jason Blood. He will be your vessel into this world and you'll be his fire that keeps him alive. Now Etrigan, kill that beast of a dragon. Then the dragon burst out of his cage and Etrigan leaps over to the dragon to drop a hard punch across its face, dropping it to the ground. Then the dragon turns its head towards Etrigan, letting out a breath of fire, but this does not phase again, for which he was born an hellfire. Then, smirks as he digs his claws into the dragon's neck and lets out his own breath of fire, leaving nothing but a dragon's skull. Then Etrigan says, let it be known through the land, that this excuse of an army ran, and this was not the doing of a man, but it was the doing of the demon, Etrigan. Then Etrigan started slaying all of Morgana's army. He was chopping them up and cutting them down, burning most of the army to ashes. His speed and strength impressed many, and Merlin finally got to see his brother happy and no longer burning in the lake of fire. Etrigan enters the castle, breaking down the castle door. Morgana has King Arthur by the throat, hanging him off the balcony, and then says, not any father demon or your nephew gets it. Go back to whatever hell you came from. Etrigan says, drop him and you will pay. You will not be able to sleep and you'll stay awake waiting for day. You become limbless and slayed. Then he starts to breathe fire at her and she drops King Arthur, but before he hits the ground Merlin teleports in, grabs Arthur and teleports out before hitting the ground. The fire starts to burn down the witch and you could start to see her flesh melt off. She tries to teleport, but Etrigan has already damaged her book, depowering her greatly. She now lays there skinless and very injured. Merlin throws her into a cell and enchants it to withhold her magic. Merlin looks at Etrigan and says, gone, gone oh Etrigan, rise again once more in the form of man. Then Etrigan turns back into Jason Blood. Jason looks at Merlin and says, what have you done? Merlin says, Etrigan wanted out of hell and you needed a way to live and we needed this battle to be won. We all got what we wanted. Jason says, I can feel the evil in my body, the fire beneath my skin, the rage hiding in the shadows. This is no way to live. This demon cannot be a part of my life. Merlin says, you need him just as much as he needs you. You will achieve great things. I'm sorry, but it is done. Then Jason drops down and starts to cry and Arthur gives him a hug. Arthur says, cheer up old friend, think of all the good you did for Camelot today. You damn near single-handedly saved this kingdom. I would say I'd give you the highest honor, but I don't think that would even represent what you've done here today. Jason replies, thank you sire, but I don't know how dangerous this demon is and I need to go off on my own to find out how I'm gonna live my new life. Arthur says, what about your family? Your wife and your kids? Jason says, tell them the truth. I died in battle. And I'm gonna ask you a favor, and that is to watch over and take care of them. That's all I ask from you, my king. Arthur nods as the old friend hugs, then part ways, and Jason travels the globe trying to figure out where he fits in his new world. Time goes on and Jason stays the same age, not aging, not even a day. 800 years go by and Jason finds out that Etrigan is very dangerous. Sometimes the demon will go years without reverting back to human form, wanting to make a name for himself. Etrigan has gone on many killing sprees. Sometimes he likes to kill for sport just to see how many numbers he can rack up. So Jason tries not to use the form for as long as he can, living a lonely life, never letting anyone get too close because the fear of hurting them is too great.